dare you, dirty thing? Forgive me. Forgive you? Did you know how much this dress cost? I didn't mean to pour water on you. Forgive me. Forgive you? Security! Come and beat this one up for me. You're fired. I will make sure you pay dearly for pouring water on me. I will let you know I'm the fiancé of the owner of this company.
Madam, please don't send me away. I have nowhere to go. I beg you.
Then go and rot on the street. Who cares?
Nonsense.
Who said nonsense just now among you people?
No, nobody, ma'am.
I'm the one. Now the one this is this woman not old enough to be your mother? You're so mean and rude, young lady.
Slap her again. Judith's voice cut across the entire office floor like a blade as she talked to the head security. Teach that useless cleaner her place. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Because the woman Judith had just struck across the face, the old woman in the worn-out dress, on her knees now, hand pressed to her cheek, was not just a cleaner. She was someone they'll all find out and gasp. Henry Okafor was not the kind of man you forgot after meeting him. Not because of the way he dressed, though he dressed well. Not because of the car he drove, though it cost more than most people's houses. It was something quieter than that. The way he moved through a room like he already knew how everything in it would end. The kind of calm that only comes from never having to beg for anything. His father, Chief Emeka Okafor, had built the company from a single warehouse and a borrowed truck. By the time he died, that company had offices in 4 countries, government contracts on 2 continents, and a name that opened doors before you knocked. He left it all to Henry, but not without conditions. The will was read on a Tuesday morning, and the lawyer cleared his throat twice before the room fully understood what he was saying. The inheritance, every share, every property, every account, would transfer to Henry completely upon one condition. He must be married within 18 months of this reading. Henry had sat very still in that chair and said nothing. His mother, seated beside him in a black dress and dark glasses, had said nothing either. But on the drive home, she had turned to him in the back seat and said very quietly, "Leave it to me." Judith Eze had been waiting for this moment most of her adult life. She and Henry had grown up in the same circles, school events, family functions, the kind of social gatherings where parents size up other people's children and begin drafting futures. She was beautiful in the way that photographs will. Polished, articulate in public, the daughter of a businessman with enough respectability to make the match sensible on paper. Henry's mother had chosen her. Henry had not objected, which, to everyone around him, was close enough to yes, even though he had some reservations about some of her character. And Judith had taken that silence and built an entire kingdom on it. She started referring to Henry's driver as her driver, started arriving at company events as though she were already on the letterhead, started telling people with the particular confidence of someone who has never been corrected that the wedding was being planned. She carried the title Future Mrs. Henry Okafor the way some people carry actual titles, loudly and in rooms where it could be heard. But outside the polished rooms and the curated appearances, Judith was a different creature entirely. The shopkeeper once gave her the wrong change. She made him stand in the doorway of his own store and apologize loud enough for the street to hear. The parking attendant who scratched her car door slightly while she watched, she had him removed from his position before the week was out. Domestic workers in her family home had a rotation system among themselves, a quiet understanding of how to stay out of her orbit and for how long. She was not cruel in the dramatic, cartoonish way. She was precise about it, surgical. She knew exactly how much power she had over certain people, and she used it the way some people use tools, efficiently, without guilt, because tools don't have feelings, and neither, in her estimation, did people who served her. One afternoon, a woman was sitting outside Judith's gate. Old, thin, a small child pressed against her side, the child's forehead glistening with fever sweat. The woman wasn't loud about it. She wasn't performing. She just sat there with her hand out and her eyes down, the way people sit when humility has been ground into them over many years. Please, she said, as Judith's car slowed at the gate. My daughter is sick. I just need something small. Anything. Judith looked at her through the window for a long moment. Then she rolled the glass down. Instead of sitting here like a parasite, she said clearly, go and find work. This is not a charity home. The window went back up. The car went through the gate. The woman watched it go. Then she reached into the pocket of her wrapper, pulled out a small phone, and made a call. She failed, the woman said quietly, completely. Because she had not actually been begging. She had been hired by Henry's mother to find out exactly what kind of woman Judith Eze was when nobody important was watching. Margaret Okafor had survived 40 years of building a business empire by being naive. She had heard things about Judith, small things, from careful sources, the kind of things that don't make headlines but accumulate quietly into a portrait you cannot ignore. She didn't believe it at first because Judith has always presented herself as a well-mannered, proper lady to her. So she decided to gather evidence. The woman at the gate was the first test. Failed. For the second test, Margaret Okafor, 63 years old, founder of 3 charitable foundations, woman who had shaken hands with presidents, put on a faded Ankara dress, a pair of broken slippers with a strap held together by wire, and a headscarf pulled low over her face, and applied for a cleaning position at Okafor and Sons. The HR assistant barely looked at her application. She was hired the same afternoon. For 3 days, Margaret mopped floors. She carried mop buckets up corridors. She wiped the windows. She refilled soap dispensers in bathrooms that executive staff used without looking up from their phones. She was invisible in the way that people in service uniforms become invisible, not because they disappear, but because the people around them choose not to see. She watched everything. She watched how the staff spoke to each other when no one senior was in the room. She watched which manager said thank you and which one stepped around the mop without acknowledging the person holding it. She noted who held doors and who let them swing shut. She was building a picture. And then, on the 4th morning, Judith arrived. She came through the main entrance at 9:15, 20 minutes after the official start of the executive meeting she was attending as Henry's guest. She wore a dress that cost more than the cleaning staff's monthly salary combined. Her heels announced her before the doors opened. The office atmosphere changed when she walked in. Not because people liked her, because people had learned to brace. Margaret was at the far end of the corridor, walking quietly when she heard the heels approaching. She kept her head down, kept the mop moving, the kind of muscle memory that the invisible develop. Then the flaw happened. It was a genuine accident. Margaret knew the moment it occurred. The mop head caught a groove in the tiles, water was released, and the arc of it crossed the corridor in the exact moment Judith stepped forward. A drop, maybe 2, on the hem of the dress. The sound Judith made was not a sharp sound. It was the particular sound of someone who has been waiting without knowing it for a reason. Are you blind? The corridor stopped. Judith's hand came down before Margaret could turn fully around. The slap landed clean across her cheek. Margaret absorbed it, did not fall, did not cry out, just stood with her hand at her side and looked at Judith with an expression that held nothing readable in it. Do you know how much this dress costs? Did you know I'm the future wife of the owner of this place? Judith's voice was climbing. Who hired this woman? Who is responsible for putting this? She grabbed Margaret's collar. Useless, incompetent. Security, get her out. I want her out of this building right now. The whole floor had stopped. Keyboards were still, phones had been set down, people stood in doorways, in clusters, doing the arithmetic of power, measuring how bad this was against how much it would cost them to say something. Nobody moved. And then a voice said, quietly and clearly, "You can't speak to her like that." Chioma Williams had been working at Okafor and Sons for 14 months. She was not a cleaner. She was a junior accounts officer. The kind of position that requires a good degree and considerable determination to get into a company of this size, and considerably more to survive once you are in it. She was not remarkable in the ways offices measure remarkability. She didn't push for visibility. She came early, stayed focused, did the work, and left. But she had a quality that quieter people sometimes carry without knowing it. A line. A line she had never explained to anyone because she'd never had to cross it before today. She stepped out of the cluster of frozen colleagues. "She is old enough to be your mother," Chioma said. Her voice was level, not shaking, but not performing either. "Show some respect." The corridor went a different kind of silence. Judith turned slowly. She looked at Chioma the way you look at something that has spoken when it was not supposed to, taking in the simple work clothes, the junior position, the absolute audacity. "I'm sorry," Judith said, with the dangerous softness of someone preparing to be very unsoftened. "What did you just say to me?" "You heard me." The slap came fast and hard. Chioma's head turned with it. The corridor made a collective sound, half gasp, half something that had no name. Then Chioma straightened and slapped Judith back. Not a performance, not a show. The clean, decisive response of someone who has decided, fully and without apology, that this is the line. The corridor erupted. Judith lunged. Chioma didn't retreat. In front of every junior officer, every senior manager, every person on that floor who had swallowed something in the last 3 days and said nothing, Chioma held her ground. Security separated them. HR was involved before the end of the hour. By afternoon, the incident had moved through the building the way these things move, floor by floor, version by version, gaining detail in some retellings and losing it in others, but always with the same central fact at the heart of it. The new cleaner had been slapped by the boss's almost fiancé, and a junior account officer had slapped back. The next morning felt like the morning after the weather. Everyone came in quieter, sat at their desks with a particular kind of industry. That means no one wants to be noticed. The general expectation was singular and simple. Chioma would be fired before lunch. She came in at her usual time, sat at her desk, opened her files, did not perform distress, did not make rounds seeking sympathy. She did the same thing she did every morning, which was work. At 10 o'clock, the call came. Henry's office, now. She walked in and sat in the chair across from him and folded her hands in her lap. Henry studied her for a moment before speaking. He had a way of doing that, of looking at people long enough to find the thing they were doing with their face before they knew they were doing it. "Do you understand what happened yesterday?" he asked. "Yes, sir, I do." "And do you understand the position that puts this company in, and me?" "Yes, sir, I do." "Then you understand why we're having this conversation." "I do," she paused. "I'm ready to go. I cleared my desk this morning." Henry said nothing. "But I want to say something before I do, if that's all right." He nodded. "I don't regret it." She said it simply, not defiantly, not with tears, the way you say something true when the time for softening it has passed. That woman was old and she was on the ground and she was being humiliated in front of everyone, and nobody moved. I couldn't let it slide. I know that's not how these things work here, but I couldn't. I'm sorry. She stopped. The office was very quiet. Something crossed Henry's face, brief, contained, quickly put away. "You can wait outside," he said. She waited for 11 minutes. Then the door to Henry's office opened, not from the inside, but from the corridor beside it. And in walked a woman. Margaret Okafor moved through the room without hurry. She was wearing the clothes she actually wore, a dark, perfectly cut suit, a single piece of jewelry at her collarbone, and heels that added to a presence that needed no addition. Her face carried the particular composure of someone who has lived through enough to know that the room always catches up to you eventually. She crossed to the center of the room. She looked at Judith, who had been called in separately and was now standing near the window, with the posture of someone who senses the ground changing under them but has not yet committed to a response. She looked at Chioma sitting in the chair. And then she said to no one in particular, "Nobody needs to be fired." The room was very still, because I have a few things to say first. She turned to face Judith fully. "I am the woman you slapped yesterday, the cleaner." She let that land. "I also sent the woman you refused to help 3 weeks ago outside your gate with a sick child and asked you for something small. Another pause. And I'm supposed to be your mother-in-law, but I guess that will never happen again. The sound Judith made was not a word. I want you to understand something, Margaret continued, and her voice was the quietest it had been. I have watched you for 3 weeks. Not what you show in this office, not what you perform at dinners, what you do when you believe no one who matters is looking. She stepped closer. Character is not the face you put on for the rich. It is how you treat the people you believe have nothing to offer you. I'm happy I'm able to know the true you. She turned away. Judith tried to speak, shout, scream, or do something, but she couldn't. The tears that came were genuine, which made them somehow worse. Because genuine remorse and genuine entitlement can occupy the same person, and neither one cancels the other out. She was escorted from the building 40 minutes later. Not violently, not publicly, just finally. The relationship with Henry did not end in a conversation. It ended in the absence of one. He simply stopped being reachable in the ways she tried to reach him, and after a while, the trying became too loud to sustain. Her parents remind her of how they've warned her against her terrible character, but she wouldn't listen. Chioma was not fired. Henry called her back in at 1 in the afternoon. His mother was seated in the chair beside the window. He was standing. I owe you an apology, he said. She blinked. Sir? For the environment that made what happened yesterday possible. For the culture in this building that made everyone stand still for her when they should have moved. He paused. But you moved to save a helpless old woman. Thank you. She didn't know what to say, so she said nothing. I have watched you for 3 weeks. Not what you show in this office, not what you perform at dinners, what you do when you believe no one who matters is looking. She stepped closer. Character is not the face you put on for the rich. It is how you treat the people you believe have nothing to offer you. I'm happy I'm able to know the true you. She turned away. Judith Eze had everything the world tells you to want. Beauty, status, access, a future prearranged and waiting, needing only the performance of a few more years of being agreeable in the right rooms. She lost it not in a scandal, not in a betrayal, not in any of the dramatic ways wealth and position usually exit a person's life. She lost it in a corridor on a Thursday morning, the moment she decided that an old woman on the ground was beneath her noticing. Chioma Williams had none of that. A junior position, a small desk, a life that asked a lot and returned it slowly. She gained everything she gained not by strategy, not by calculation, and not by being in the right place, but by being, without apology or performance, exactly who she was when it cost her to be. The old woman is not old anymore when Chioma looks at her now. She just looks like a mother, which it turns out is exactly what she is. Some people walk into the right rooms and still find a way to leave. Some people stand in corridors and refuse to move. That choice, quiet, costly, unremarkable to most, is the one that changes everything. Thanks for listening and watching. Subscribe if you haven't. See you in the next video. Have a great day.